What I will often do is I'll go take a walk, turn on my voice memo app, talk out loud about like whatever's on my mind, and then I'll transcribe that with Whisper. Then I'll throw it into ChatGPT and be like, can you summarize what I said? Can you pull out anything interesting, any ideas that you think are like particularly good? And it's really, really quite good at doing that and pulling out the little nuggets of like insight for me. And then I'll have a big document full of notes. I have no idea how to like turn this into anything because I've been thinking about this for so long. And I'll often take that and throw it into ChatGPT or Claude and be like, hey, can you please turn this into a outline? And it's actually really, really good at figuring out how to take the unstructured blob of notes that I gave it and then find the simple structure for me that helps me like get started. It's really good for helping you understand what's not working about a piece you're writing. With ChatGPT and Claude, I can just sort of like throw it in there and be like, hey, you're an expert computer scientist. Can you like look through what I wrote and see if there are any problems with it? It's not going to be perfect, but it does find stuff and it gives me a level of confidence where I'm like, yeah, I think this is pretty much right. I think we can publish it. And that just dramatically expands the number of things that I can actually write.
All right. So today I have the pleasure of talking to Dan Schipper. Dan is the co-founder of Every, a popular tech publication. And he also hosts a great podcast that he recently rebranded to AI and I, right?
I did. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a great name. So Dan, we're both writers. So why don't we start with this? Like how many hours do you think you save every week by using AI to write and do everything else?
That's a good question. I don't really think of it as like saving hours because I still spend like a lot of time writing. I think that there are certain tasks that would have taken me a while that are a little bit more instant or just are much shorter than they used to be. But I still spend probably a similar amount of time actually writing. I just spend it on other things. So I think there are certain tasks that go from like, I don't know, like 30 minutes or an hour to like a couple minutes or something like that. But I'm just spending the rest of the time on other stuff.
Got it. I mean, like, why don't we go back to a time before, ChatGPT and all these other tools? Like, how did you write a new post or article before this stuff existed? Like, maybe walk me through your process.
How did I write a post before this stuff existed? I mean, I had a lot of notes, which I still do. And I would go like have a bunch of things in a note file or in a to-do list of like different ideas and different like sentences and quotes and all that kind of stuff. And then I would go and sit down in front of a Google Doc and try to turn it into something good and then publish it. I mean, there's a lot of nuance there, right? Like there's a lot of Googling or internet research or a lot of like looking at different books that I've read or talking to people or whatever. At Every, we have editors. So there's a lot of editing going on, which is still happening. So there's a lot of sort of complexity to that process, but it's sort of fundamentally a like process of me gathering a bunch of different pieces of information or pieces of ideas or insights and then sitting down and typing them up in the right order.
Got it. So do you have like a list of topics you want to write about and then you kind of gather a bunch of raw research on it? Is that kind of how it starts?
Yeah. And obviously like it sort of depends on the topic, but like how much research I have to do. But yeah, in general, like I have a bunch of little ideas or little ideas for like headlines or topics that are kind of like catching my eye. And then I have for each one of those things, like, especially if it's a more complicated thing, I'll just have a little notes doc where I'll just throw little ideas into it as I'm turning it over in my head. So that when I get down to write, I usually have some raw material to work with.
And are you one of those writers who like writes a first draft first and then edits, or do you kind of like edit along the way? Or how do you do that, writing versus editing?
I edit as I go, which I think I don't recommend necessarily. So for me, like when I'm editing as I go, it's not a sort of like perfectionistic thing that gets in the way of me actually continuing the piece. Sometimes that happens. Like I'll notice that I'm like over editing and then I will like just stop that and I'll just like write something and I'll just be like, okay, you got to just write something terrible. And I'll just force myself to write without editing. But normally it's sort of like I'll write some stuff and then I'll go back and read it. That'll get it in my head where I'm like, okay, this is the flow. This is the rhythm of the piece. And then I'll tighten up the little parts of it that like seem like they're kind of, stuck or not really flowing in the right way. And then because I've caught the flow of the piece, I can go and add a couple more paragraphs and then I'll do the same thing again. And I'll just start at the beginning and then keep going like that.
Definitely some sort of quality bar, but you're not like a perfectionist when when trying to do this. Yeah.
I really try not to. I mean, like I publish every week, so it would be kind of impossible for me to be too perfectionistic about it. I'd go literally crazy. it goes back and forth, right? Different pieces have different levels of weight to them and different levels of like, oh my God, I really hope that this is good and this is really close to my heart or whatever. And sometimes those are the hardest pieces to get out because you've been thinking about them for so long and you feel like you have this brilliant idea. And then once it actually gets on the page, you're like, this sucks. Like, I hate this. I don't know why this is so bad. So there's just, it's just different for different pieces.
Okay. So now that, you're like a power user of AI, like how has this writing process changed with these AI tools? Like, where do these AI tools come in?
They're kind of like infused into every part of my process. So in sort of like the first sort of like ideation stage, one is I'm like constantly looking things up in ChatGPT or Claude, just on its own, or as I'm reading, I'm like, taking a picture of what I'm reading and like being like, hey, can you like help me understand this, or like tell me if this is actually right, or like let's go a little bit deeper on XYZ. It's really helpful for that. And I think like if you're a writer, to have good output, you have to have good inputs. And I think these tools are incredibly good for maximizing the amount you get out of your inputs. I think also like when I'm sort of starting to get into like, okay, like I need to find some ideas, I need to find some things to write about. What I will often do is I'll go take a walk and I'll turn on my voice memo app and I will just like talk out loud about like whatever's on my mind. And then I'll transcribe that with Whisper. And then I'll throw it into ChatGPT and be like, hey, like, can you summarize what I said? Can you pull out anything interesting, any ideas that you think are like particularly good? And it's really, really quite good at doing that and pulling out the little nuggets of like insight for me where I can look at them and be like, oh yeah, that's actually could be a good article idea. And those will either go into a to-do list or they'll go into like an actual Google Doc or a Lex page. We have an AI writing app that we incubated at Every called Lex. So sometimes I use that. Once that happens, what I'll often do is like, especially for a piece that I've been working on for a long time, like I'll have a big document full of notes and I'll be like, I have no idea how to like turn this into anything. Like, I don't know where to start because I've been thinking about this for so long. And I'll often take that and throw it into ChatGPT or Claude and be like, hey, can you please like turn this into a outline? And it's actually really, really good at figuring out how to take the unstructured blob of notes that I gave it and then find a like simple structure for me that helps me like get started, which is really, really cool. Very useful. I think in the actual writing process itself, it's also quite helpful. There's a lot of tasks that it makes a lot easier. So for example, a lot of writing is summarizing. So if you're, writing about ideas, which I write about all the time, you're often referencing older ideas. And in order to reference older ideas, like scientific theories or philosophy or, what happened in a particular novel that you're like relating something to, like you have to summarize what happened. You have to summarize the theory. You have to summarize the philosophical idea. And language models are really good at doing that. And I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing it for things you don't already know about, but particularly for things where it's like, yeah, I read this a long time ago. I basically know what it says, but like it would take me like 3 hours of Wikipedia reading to like fully summarize it in a nice way. ChatGPT is like perfect for like summarizing it for you right there in the context of whatever you're writing, which I love. It's useful for all sorts of things like that. Like, it's really good for finding like the right metaphor or simile. It's really good for helping you understand what's not working about a piece you're writing. Even like I published a piece today about how language models work, and the piece itself is not technical because I tried to make it as jargon free as possible, but like it's covering deeper technical topics that like I know, but like I'm not the world's foremost expert on. And so in a previous world, I would have been very hesitant to publish something like that because it would be really hard to check. Like I'd have to go find a friend of mine who's like really deep into language models, then convince them to like read it and make sure that I hadn't made any mistakes. And with ChatGPT and Claude, like I can just sort of like throw it in there and like be like, hey, you're an expert computer scientist. Can you like look through what I wrote and see if there are any problems with it? And it's not going to be perfect necessarily, but it does find stuff. And it gives me a level of confidence where I'm like, yeah, I think this is pretty much right. And Claude and ChatGPT agree. So like, I think we can publish it. And that just dramatically expands the number of things that I can actually write.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think from my experience, it's also, I think it's like three things. It's really good at summarizing stuff, like you said, like just pasting a bunch of research in there and telling you to like get the TRDR or summarize it. I think it's really good at editing. Like, I don't know if you do this, but like I have like a crappy draft that I write myself. And then I paste it into Claude with a bunch of examples of my past posts. And I ask it to like edit it based on my style.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it does a pretty good job of just like cleaning it up and making it like my style. And I don't necessarily just copy and paste it over, but I just like look at what its output is and kind of like manually edit my own thing to kind of like pick the best parts.
I love that. I've never tried that. I should really try that. That's amazing.
Yeah, you should put your best post in Claude and just like, tell it to edit in a similar style. And like, when you talk to, ChatGPT and Claude, do you have like a prompt structure, or do you kind of just like talk to it as kind of like another coworker?
I think I always talk to it in the simplest way possible first. And then if it gets it right, great. And then I will like add more details to it if I need it to get better. So first is just like a sentence. And then if that doesn't work, then it's like often asking it to simulate an expert. Like, you are a professional editor. You are a like expert in computer science or whatever. See if that works. If that doesn't work, then giving it some examples. So like, here's what I want. Here's like what good looks like. Or here's an input-output example. Here's like, for talking about article editing, it's like, here's a raw article and here's an edited article. Now I'm going to give you a raw article. I want you to edit it in that style. I'll also have it, if that doesn't work or it needs more, like I'll also have it like analyze a bunch of examples and write itself a little rule book for like, how do you do this well? And then I'll put that in the prompt. I'll also have it critique its own work and then have it revised based on the critique. So there's a lot of stuff like that, but I tend to try to just be as simple as quick as possible, and then to make it more complicated if I need to.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, like, I think my most frequent prompt is just like, here's like a paragraph or a few sentences. Like, can you make this more clear and concise? Or like,
Yeah, definitely.
we can't find the right words. It's pretty good at that. And maybe you ask it for like a couple of variations, right?
It is really good at that. Yeah.
And how about for like your podcast and some of your other work? Like, do you use AI as part of that too? Or
I mean, I definitely use AI for podcasting because we like use ChatGPT and Claude and all these other things on the show. So it's definitely part of the show. I sometimes use it for prep, just like guest research and stuff like that. I really like Notion AI for that because I can make a little like dossier of like who the person is, and it's all written in Notion. And so it's like really well organized for me, which is pretty cool. And then for other work, I mean, we like build software products. So like I built an app for us, like an internal tool we use end to end in like 2 days with ChatGPT, like a month ago.
What was the tool?
So it's called Spiral, and basically what it does is I noticed like a month or two ago that Claude is like basically a 70% as good a writer as I am for certain things, and there are all these like repetitive tasks that we do at Every that are kind of like summarizing content from one form to another. So like taking an intro to an article and turning it into a headline, or taking an article and turning it into a summary for our Sunday Digest, or taking a podcast transcript and turning it into a tweet to tweet the episode. Like, there's all this stuff that's very repetitive that I really want to have in my voice, or like in Every-ish voice. And either I have to end up doing it, or we have a bunch of really talented ghostwriters on staff who have to end up doing it. But like for everyone, it's sort of like a drag. And with Spiral, you can just like basically create a spiral. You can say, I want to convert this to this, and then you can give it a bunch of examples. It'll write a little guide for itself, and then it gives you a text box that you can paste in, your podcast transcript, and it'll turn into your tweet for you. Or it'll do like 5 of them and rank them, and that way, like everyone on the team can like start, 70% of the way to good on these types of tasks. And it's sort of starting there, but I really think it could be used for lots of other things too. Like, there's a lot of similarities to like decisions. It's like I'm often asked to like make decisions where I have like a pretty clear set of rules or heuristics that I'm using that I think like I could put into a Spiral and have it like give people feedback without me necessarily having to be involved. I think it's good for code potentially for the same kinds of things. And you can like string them together. It's actually kind of cool. So we've been using it a lot internally. I think we're probably going to launch it publicly at some point soon. So it's been really fun.
It sounds like it's like a tool that gets you like maybe 50 to 70% of the way there. And then, it's way easier to write with something on the page than like from blank, right? So
it really is. Yeah. It's really good for that. And it's really good for kind of like making the taste that goes into whatever that thing is legible, because Claude is like making it legible. It's writing a little guide for itself, and then operationalizing it so that everyone on the team is starting from a place where they sort of have a little bit of that taste infused into what they're starting with. Which makes it easier to create a consistent set of tone or voice or decision-making style or whatever inside of the org. And it's been really good.
So you've loaded this thing with like a bunch of examples of your past tweets, or it's like a few shot prompt, right? Yeah. Got it. Have you used this? I was talking to Lenny yesterday. Have you used this to like for your podcast titles and stuff? Have you used AI to make it more clickbaity or done some of that, like some of the packaging?
it's used for that. So it's sort of like we'll give it a transcript and ask it like, okay, what headlines should we use? And it's sort of we have examples of YouTube or other kinds of headlines that we think work, or headlines just from Every that have worked really well. So yeah, I definitely use it for that.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about all the great people that you've interviewed. Like you interviewed Reid Hoffman, you interviewed like top creators like David Perell. What are some common themes in kind of like how they use AI, or like some things that you learned that are common across these folks?
I mean, I really think everybody is sort of unique and different in that they all have very specific ways that it like fits into their life. I think the sort of commonality is for the people that use it and figure it out, and those are the only people I have on my show. They're generally like pretty patient, curious people who are interested in experimenting and don't have the sort of like knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, this didn't work. And are like, I'm making an investment in like learning how to use this new tool. And like, it's actually kind of fun. It's really interesting, even when it fails, you know? And so I think that sort of spirit of open-mindedness and curiosity and exploration is like what allows people to get the most out of tools like this that are incredibly powerful, but are also sort of like incredibly early in their life cycle and aren't particularly well understood. So there's not like a set process necessarily for anyone to do any of their work because it's like too new. And all the people on my show, that doesn't bother them so much. They're just willing to like go for it.
Okay, so it's just kind of like constantly experimenting and trying new things and see what they can build with it, right? Is that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I'm especially interested in some of the guests that you invited who are like more like solopreneurs or like trying to start a business. Like we talked about how AI can help you make content, but like, do you also use it to kind of run everything in some other way? Like, does it help you run your business in some other way?
Totally. Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I think like the first thing is just that it's a very high leverage tool. So I think I myself and everyone else at Every who are all using it can just get more done. Like we have more powers, you know, like I can write a little faster, but I can code way faster, you know? And there are plenty of people on my team who like sort of went from like English as a second language and like couldn't code to like my emails that I send are perfect. And like I'm like coding apps even though I don't know how they work. And I'm like doing all this design stuff. Like it's just like a kind of a crazy power up for small organizations, because if you have that sort of spirit of curiosity and everyone's like willing and interested in doing it, you can just get like way more stuff done in areas that you wouldn't have been able to already. So that's one thing. I think it's also just quite good for decision making and sort of understanding different situations and understanding like what you want. So I'm very frequently using it to like help me like if in a particular situation be like, okay, here's what's going on. I'm doing this negotiation, or I have to make this strategic decision, or I'm really excited about this new idea. Like, what do you think? And it's really good at helping me understand what's going on for me. And then it's also really good because I can put like my goals and stuff into its custom instructions or into its memory. And then I can say like, you know, because for me, I'm like a very opportunistic person. I'm like a puppy with a toy, or like I like to chase shiny objects sometimes because I'm just like I just get curious and excited, you know. And I think that's a really fun part of my personality, but it also can be a little chaotic when you're running a company. And so ChatGPT knows this about me, and I've asked it to be like, hey, like when I'm talking to you about a situation, like I want to be a little more strategic, a little less opportunistic. Like, can you just remind me that that's my goal and what my goals actually are so that I can see how this lines up with them or not. And it's very good at being like, hey, remember, you have a little bit of shiny object syndrome sometimes. Like, think about how this connects to your goals. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're totally right. I should just not do this right now. So it's really good.
Got it. So I have this like GP that I made for myself called like personal coach or something. And then I loaded it. Yeah. I added a bunch of like my goals for the year and like, here's my current situation. And then I asked for like random advice. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Or,
yeah, basically. Yeah.
And then when it has a Scarlett Johansson or whatever voice, it would be even better, right? It'd be like a very patient.
I'm excited for that. Yeah, I have not gotten the new voice interface, but I think it'll be really cool for that.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like even like my friends or like even my spouse, like she doesn't necessarily have patience to listen to me explain my goals and everything for like 10 minutes, you know? But like this thing is like so patient. It listens to you forever.
It's very patient, and it also just knows everything about everything, right? Like I have a therapist, but like he doesn't know anything about like running a media business, you know? So like he can listen, but like he doesn't have enough context to like help me make decisions. And so it's really nice to have someone who's like unfailingly empathetic and also has the entire knowledge of everything on the internet in its brain to like help you figure out what you want to do.
Yeah. Like even in my day job, like I'm constantly surprised when people don't use this stuff. I feel like the adoption is actually not as much as we think it is, like, because we're both like enthusiasts, right? Like I have this person who like is not really good at writing concisely. And before I would like give them advice about like, oh, here's kind of like some things you can do. But now I'm just like, hey, why don't you just copy and paste all your stuff into AI and they get more concise. Like you immediately become like 10x more effective.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that the adoption is lower than you think. I think it's incredibly valuable for people. And I think it's low because it's a very general purpose tool. So you have to be thinking a lot about like, okay, where can I like fit this into my life, right? Like you're staring at a blank text box. Like that's sort of intimidating. And then I think people also have to kind of like always make this decision when they're doing their job or they're going about their daily lives and they're really busy and stressed. And they're like, okay, I can do this task in the way I know how to do it. And I'm guaranteed that it will get done and I can move on to the next thing. Or I can experiment with this like other thing that I don't really know how to use. And it might be that I spend an hour on it and I don't even get the task done. And now I'm even more behind than I was before. And so it's just easier to kind of like stick with the status quo. And I totally get that. I think like what I've tried to do at Every and what I think is really important and helpful for companies is like carving out time and space for people to be exploratory about this stuff without feeling like it's going to make them get behind in their like day-to-day tasks so that they can get comfortable enough to use it well. Or I think another thing that companies can do is like, there are some people who are just going to play with it anyway. They're just like so excited about it. They like love it. These are kind of like the tip of the spear people. Mm-hmm. Let those people play with it, figure out what they have learned, what they have figured out, where they'll do all the exploring to reduce things down into a process that you can use, and then take that process and teach it to the people who don't want to do the exploring and just want to get their job done. And I think that's a very effective way of getting more AI use in an organization.
Yeah, so you encourage your employees to kind of share best practices with each other and stuff, right? Share the latest tools.
Yeah, but specifically like encouraging the employees who are organically excited about it to go find the best practices. And then encouraging them to share them with other people that don't really want to go do the finding, but will follow it if they're given instructions.
Got it. I want to ask you a quick question about using AI to code. Like, do you think this thing has got to a point where someone who is not very technical can actually build something that's not just like a thing to play with, like Spiral or something that they can actually use?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like we have the very, very first version of Spiral that was built like a year ago. Basically, was someone who works for me. His name is Lucas Crespo. He's super talented. He's our creative lead. We needed a tool to like to do Sunday digest summaries. We have a digest of all the articles we publish, and it goes out every Sunday. And we have summaries of every article, and it's very time consuming to like write a summary, especially from scratch. And so he was like, I think I could do something about that. And he just like used ChatGPT to build and ship a Heroku app where you could like paste an article in and it would produce a summary of it in our style using GPT-3. I guess it was GPT-4. And it like he deployed it to Heroku and like he had no idea how it worked, and we used it for like a year. It's like not a good piece of software. Like I wouldn't sell it, but we used it all the time. It was like, it's amazing. And it's amazing that all it took was him kind of like having the stick-to-itiveness to let ChatGPT figure it out and follow its instructions. I think that it's definitely though, like there's this whole, I think, misconception that, any non-technical person can like go and like make something and it'll like be a business and whatever. And it's sort of, you can definitely build and ship something. And I teach a course where we take people from zero to you built and shipped an app that people can use in 30 days, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. But the way that happens is not necessarily like the AI is just doing it all for you. It's like what the AI does is it gives you something you can see super quick. Like the first day of the course, you build something that basically works and you're like, holy shit, I can't believe this works. And then you're like, okay, I want to understand how. Like, how does this actually work so that I can learn how to make it better? And then we can do a lot of like, okay, here's the basics of programming and here's how you use ChatGPT to figure out what's going on in your program and all that kind of stuff. Whereas like when I learned programming, it was like 6 months of like if statements and like while loops and like variables and all this kind of stuff that like I had zero idea how it would level up into anything that I wanted to learn. And so it was like, it was very taxing to get through that. And I think AI sort of like means that you get to something that looks cool and works like it works like much faster, which provides the motivation to like go and understand the underlying stuff. And the people who do both, they use the AI and understand how it works, are going to like move a lot faster than people who just have one or the other.
That is a key step, right? You can just like use it to generate some toy program, and like I think you actually have to take the next step to be like, okay, now explain to me how this works. Like add some comments in your code. I think one of the more frustrating parts when I play this to code is like trying to create something, but it's not perfect. And then you're like, hey, go fix this specific part of it. And then it just keeps generating. So you end up in this loop where you just keep copying and pasting stuff, right? And hoping that it'll work. So maybe like understanding how it works like allows you to tweak stuff yourself and like try to get out of this loop.
Definitely. I mean, like you can get into that mode with it where you're like, I don't want to think about this. I want you to do it. And then you're just like fighting with it to like do it without having to think about it too much. And yeah I think like, you know, sometimes being less lazy about it and just doing it yourself is like helpful, you know? But I have the same experience.
Okay. Let's wrap up by talking a little bit about the AI landscape. I think you've been attending all these like events, right? Like Microsoft Build and all these events. How do you think this space is evolving, man? Like, you know, there's like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, xAI. What's going to happen in the next 6 months or a year?
I mean, I think like basically everyone was sort of surprised that Google and Anthropic like caught up to GPT-4 when they did, which like to be fair, GPT-4 came out like a year or more ago. So they're about a year behind. But I think OpenAI was so dominant for so long that I think people thought they might even have had a longer lead time. But my guess is that we'll see GPT-5 in the next year, 9 months to a year. I'm pretty fairly confident about that, but without any inside information. I'm just like sort of reading the tea leaves, and my guess is that it will be substantially better. I think there's a lot of questions about like, okay, are we reaching like diminishing returns? And I think also, you know, the open source stuff is continues to be really interesting. And what we're finding right now is that the smaller models, you can make them much sparser and smaller and still retain a lot of power. So like the big models are like relatively inefficient. And so we're able to run surprisingly powerful models on smaller and smaller computers that like, you know, are just your laptop or whatever. And I think we'll continue to find that over time. And I think that's really cool. And that feels very exciting. Having more personal AI stuff available is, I think, good.
Yeah, because right now there isn't really a personal AI that just kind of remembers everything you do. Or maybe people don't want this, but like I want this. Like everything you do, like I don't have to do custom instructions. It just does. It just remembers all this shit. And then whenever I ask a question, it's like very personalized to what I do.
I mean, that's basically what Microsoft launched 2 weeks ago at Build. I think it's called Reflect, or I think Reflect might be another app. It's called Recall, and yeah, it just records everything on your screen and everything you say and all that kind of stuff. And then but it's all local. And then you can ask questions, and all the inference is run on device on their like special Microsoft AI chip or whatever. And that seems really cool. I'm down. I've been testing this app over the last day or two called Granola, which is really cool. And it's basically like your classic kind of like meeting recorder where there are like zillions of these things, but I think it's like the best, most well done meeting recorder I've seen, which basically it hooks into your calendar, it sits on your desktop. And then what happens is when you're in a meeting, you can start it recording, but it records through your computer's audio and mic. So it doesn't have to join anything. Like it's not like Fireflies where it like joins the Zoom call or whatever. Yeah. And that's super annoying. It's just like recording everything that your computer is playing and hearing. And that's much more convenient. And then what it does is it lets you take notes, and then it also produces a transcription. And after the meeting is over, it will take your like chicken scratch notes that you've taken, where it's like a sentence here and a sentence there that's like not fully fleshed out, and it will use the transcript to like flesh all your chicken scratch notes up into like an actual like well formatted document. It's really cool. I think it's very well done.
I gotta check it out. It's called Granola.
Granola, yeah.
Okay, I just gotta get the problem is like some of these large companies are like, hey, I don't want to use any AI tools for like security reasons, but yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
What do you think about like how AI is going to impact tech jobs, man? I mean, first of all, like tech jobs has already been impacted by just like the ZERP days being over. So like a lot of people are impacted. And you wrote this post about the new job called the managers of AI models job, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what will this person do?
Yeah, the whole like kind of idea is we're moving from a world where a lot of IC work was like doing the work yourself and being in all the details yourself, to a world where I think many of us are going to be more like model managers, where we're managing models to do a lot of the work, especially like the preliminary work, like the first draft type stuff. And so the skills that are valuable in that world are, yeah, definitely still having the sort of basic skills to do it yourself, but also adding the skills of managers, like knowing how to delegate, knowing which resources to use for which project, knowing how to scope something for a particular resource, knowing how to use that resource well and give it instructions that it can follow. Like all those things are things that managers need to know. And I think like individual contributors of tomorrow will need to know those same skills, but for using models. And that's not to say that like people won't be like going into the details themselves. It's just to say that they will be doing it less frequently and be mostly, if like the metaphor for like previous, like let's say programming work was a sculptor, where like you're taking a block of marble or something and every little chip is like something that you do. I think you're going from that world to like thinking about like a gardener, where you're kind of like creating the conditions for the plant to grow. You're kind of like adjusting the soil and the temperature and the sunlight and the water and all that kind of stuff, and the plant sort of does it itself. I think that's a little bit more what's going to be happening, with the obvious caveat that you also can go in and like do the sculpting yourself when you need to. And so you kind of can get the best of both worlds, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like having a bunch of interns, like, if they're new to the role, you give them like specific instructions, check in once in a while and correct their work.
Yeah. It's very, very intern-like right now. I mean, I'm hoping, in the next couple of years, it'll be like, college or first year out of college type person. I think that's definitely doable, but we'll see.
Okay. So like, just to wrap up, like, if I'm just a regular person who's not as into this stuff as you and I, like, what are kind of like 3 things that I should do to not get left behind by AI, or just like actually like consume high signal sources and actually like make use of my time? Well,
I mean, like you're kind of lobbing me a softball here. You gotta listen to my podcast, AI and I, and you should read everything that we publish on Every. I think those are two hopefully good resources. But I think the broader thing actually goes back to the thing I said earlier at the very beginning, where you asked me like, what's the common thread of people I interview? And it's like, it's people who are literally just curious about this stuff. And so I think the beauty of ChatGPT and Claude, but like really ChatGPT right now, because it's like free to use the like frontier model, is like anyone can go use it. You don't have to pay any money to like use the best model available. And I think that's truly incredible. And so just literally going and being like, hey, like, how do I use you is a great start. And like say, this is the kind of person I am. These are the kinds of tasks I do. Like interview me to help me figure out like where I can use ChatGPT. Like you don't need necessarily to like read anything, although you can. And I think it's helpful to like know use cases and know how other people are using it. But like you can just go and sit with it and spend some time with it and play around. And I think like cultivating that spirit of curiosity and playfulness is like the thing that's going to like make the difference, rather than any one particular like skill or resource.
Makes sense. Yeah. My parents were asking me like, hey, how do I use ChatGPT? Then I'm just like, hey, just talk to it like you would talk to a person.
Yeah.
That's how you use it. It's not that complicated,
It's great. It's the first time in history that's happened. It's so cool.
All right. So I think you mentioned some of this already, but like where can people find your stuff online?
You can find me on Twitter at Dan Schipper, or X these days, at Dan Schipper, and then on every.to. I write there every week about AI. And then you can find my show, AI and I, on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks so much for your time this morning. Yeah.
Of course. Thanks for having me.